Hi everyone, this is Jim of Shiloh Kahal. Recently, in recent days, I was listening to another presentation related to the use of Hebrew idioms. And this particular presentation was discussing the use of uncovering nakedness in the context of Noah, and then juxtaposed against the use of the term uncovering nakedness in Leviticus. And everybody understood that uncovering nakedness was a Hebrew idiom for sexual involvement of some kind, generally sexual relationship. And so they were talking about that use as an idiom, and then it occurred to me that maybe my perspective when I made a couple of videos related to the first day of the week being a Hebrew idiom, that my perspective on the use of idioms was a little different than it became in the moment that I was listening to this presentation. Because basically what would be the point of the use of an idiom and defining Miaton Sabbaton as an idiom for day one of the week or the first day of the week is really to accept it as appropriate use. I guess when I was doing my original videos and presentation, I was thinking it was just it's just people using things. I didn't really think it through, but in truth, when we start saying that it's an idiom, it becomes accepted use of the word. So as I am presenting first day of the week as an idiom, I really should probably be saying Miaton Sabbaton was an idiom for first day of the week. So Miaton Sabbaton, one of the Sabbaths, would be an idiom for first day of the week. And I guess when I was first rendering that, as first day of the week being an idiom, I'm thinking, okay, see, that's just moving away from literal use of the words to excuse it with an idiom. But what occurred to me, I guess what I'm really trying to say is what occurred to me in the moment a few days back is that would be acceptable. If just like uncovering nakedness is an acceptable idiom, everybody in Hebrew knew what that would mean. So when you say uncovering nakedness, that is reasonable. I heard another, an explanation of somebody trying to tell us what an idiom would be. And he used the example of, a particular topic being a real hot potato in our society. Well, everybody in our society, because it's an idiom, knows that a real hot potato does not mean that we're talking about a potato that is hot in temperature or spicy or anything of that nature. We know that a real hot potato means that it is something explosive, it has a certain meaning. We just know that particular topic then would be something of discourse, it's an explosive topic that people have very strong opinions on. So everybody kind of knows that to be an idiom in English society today. And now, and in that particular argument, they were talking about, well, what if we use that word? What if we use that word in writing and somebody hundreds of years from now, and it's gone by, the culture has changed, and we're no longer using hot potato as an idiom any longer, and somebody goes back and reads that somebody wrote that, and they're trying to work out how this particular topic was a hot potato. So they start defining the words hot, defining the words potato, and it would not render them the answers that they're after, because the literal meaning of the words that were spoken were not the intent of the writer when they wrote them. And so that would be true. And so that got me thinking that I probably ought to do just a quick follow-up, hopefully a quick follow-up to those two videos that I made. And so I want to start with going back to the scriptures, the ISR translation called the scriptures. Because in the back of the scriptures, they deal with the first day of the week, as they do with many other topics. They give us some write-up on various topics within scripture. And this issue of Miaton Sabbaton being translated as first day of the week is a topic that is worthy of this discussion. So in the back of the book, in previous videos, I just read it to you. In this video, I took a picture and turned it into a PDF document so that I could show it to you. And let's just go through it real quick. So the first day of the week, dealing with this particular topic, it reads, their write-up reads like this. The underlying Greek text is mioton Sabbaton, which when literally translated means one of the Sabbaths. And that's it seems so very clear. I guess, when you start reading some other people writing it up, I mean, it's like people that want to, the explanations can become too involved to where it's almost like they're trying to confuse people from the simplicity of what is really happening here. And I suppose, you have to just weigh and measure what you're dealing with. But in this particular case, it just seems pretty simple and pretty evidential that mioton Sabbaton just literally means one of the Sabbaths. And if you're going to take it for its literal meaning, that just means one of the Sabbaths. Then you're left trying to figure out, well, okay, what does it mean by one of the Sabbaths? Well, I suppose if you've got 52 Sabbaths a year because you have 52 seventh days of the year, then any particular one of them would just be one of the Sabbaths. And I suppose if you were counting them, it could be the 13th Sabbath. It could be the 20th Sabbath, but in the calendar system of the Zadokian calendar, you would see that use, that they are using the, day 1, day 2, day 3, the first day, second day, third day of a week. And they would count the first Sabbath, second Sabbath, third Sabbath, fourth Sabbath after a particular, to measure the time. And they probably, since they're using numbers, and they would call it the first month, the second month, the third month, they would probably use, it would seem reasonable to say one of the Sabbaths rather than a date like July, Sabbath on July, whatever it is. So I guess what I'm saying is that the literal rendering of one of the Sabbaths makes sense in the way that they might have been speaking according to my understanding these days, where they are numbering the Sabbaths, and this just happens to be one of the Sabbaths. But they go on to say it is traditionally rendered as first day of the week. Well, traditionally rendered by who? Well, I'm pretty confident they would mean that it's traditionally rendered in the various efforts to translate the Greek into English. And I think that's true because I can only find 2, 3, I guess, if you count. You've got the Hallelujah Scriptures that renders it as on one of the Shabbatoth, which is their version of plural for Sabbath, so on one of the Sabbaths. And then you have the Yah Scriptures, which are based upon the Hallelujah Scriptures, which do the same thing. And then I have RST&E, which also embraces, I don't have it pulled up or I'd read it, but they were embracing it's one of the Sabbaths or something of that nature. I don't find it anywhere else, and anything else I have found as I've gone looking, everybody else is rendering it as first day of the week. So then the question is that a legitimate thing to do? To take this literal rendering of one of the Sabbaths and turn it into first day of the week? Well, before I even come back to that, let me just go ahead and finish their thought here, because they go on to say the term first day of the week is literally translated as, and I think it should be translated from, not as, but it would be translated from prote, which would, that's the Greek word for first, hemera, Greek word for day, t, I didn't look that up, but that probably is of the something similar to ton, but then hebdomada is week. So it would make sense that there would be, and they could write and speak what they literally meant, prote hemera t hebdomada, as the first day of the week. That seemed to have been an option, but as they say, nowhere does that appear as such in the second writings. So nowhere in the second writings are we going to see prote hemera t hebdomada. Okay, I guess. But I'm not sure how that would be necessarily. Okay, let me finish the thought here. Let me finish their thought, and then I'll come back to that. There is a strong argument that mioton Sabbaton should be rendered according to Semitic idiom as day 1 of the week. So the argument is, and because the scriptures, they followed the first day of the week, and that's what they put in their translation of mioton Sabbaton, and it appears to me that they are giving reason, excuse, which means here's what we did and here's why we did it and here's why it's okay to have done that. And it's because they're saying that Miaton Sabbaton should be rendered according to Semitic idiom as day one of the week. So what they're basically saying is that, in my reading of them, what they're basically saying is that Miaton Sabbaton is a Semitic idiom that means day one of the week. And so we should be able to find the use of Miaton Sabbaton elsewhere as day one of the week. Well, up here, to come back up to what I was saying, there is a writing that could be, there are Greek words that could have been rendered first day of the week. So there literally could have, instead of saying Miaton Sabbaton, the author could have written Prote Hemeriti Hebdomada and really removed this whole discussion. But they didn't. They wrote Miaton Sabbaton. The ISR folks are saying, but nowhere does it appear as such in the second writings. Prote Hemeriti Hebdomada. Nowhere does it appear in the second writings. Okay, so they didn't use it. Are they saying then that because Prote Hemeriti Hebdomada didn't appear, but are they saying that they must have meant the first day of the week because there's no other option? And because we don't see Prote Hemeriti Hebdomada, that they're saying Miaton Sabbaton used as an idiom for day one of the week or first day of the week is what was taking place. Well, that would require a first off assumption that when they wrote Miaton Sabbaton, it must mean first day of the week rather than one of the Sabbaths. And it only needs to mean first day of the week if you accept the teaching that Mary came on the first day of the week. And why would that make a difference? It's because it's used as some of the readings that cause us to begin thinking that Miaton Sabbaton, used in Acts 27, verse 7, chapter 20, verse 7, Miaton Sabbaton there is a rendering of the first day of the week, which is a movement of. I mean, if you get into this very far, you would see that there's just been a movement in the church to move the Sabbath, the observance of a day that is special and to be rested upon, from the seventh day Sabbath to a Sabbath or a first day observance of that special day, making all days, any day that you treat it in such a way becomes an acceptable Sabbath. This is the argument in church teaching. I suppose that if you must, because you must for your doctrinal purposes, find that Mary came on the first day of the week. And there are some who need it to be first day of the week because they've got Yahushua rising after 24-hour days, which would put him rising somewhere around 3 p.m. in the afternoon or late in the afternoon on the Sabbath. And so when if Mary had showed up on first day of the Sabbath, well, he would have still been in the tomb. So it can't be that day in that rendering if you've got him rising late in the day on the Sabbath. Then it would have to be the first day of the week, because when she comes to the tomb and it's empty, he's already risen. So it would, in that particular doctrine, you need it to be first day of the week. And so you begin saying, yeah, Miaton Sabbaton just must be correctly rendered as day one of the week. That must be what they mean, even though I believe there are 8 occurrences of it, and 7 of them all relate to this event on this day, related to his rising on the Sabbath and them showing up on either the Sabbath or on one of the day. The other Miaton Sabbaton has to do with that first gathering spoken of in Acts chapter 20, verse 7, where they're gathering on Miaton Sabbaton, but in everywhere else it's rendered they're gathering on the first day of the week, which church doctrine then pushes us toward, meaning the church doctrine takes that and says, see, here's your scriptures that say they were now meeting on the first day of the week and we're no longer meeting on the Sabbath. It's used. I've heard it. I've done videos on it where it's used in that teaching. Well, if you must have a resurrection late in the day or in the afternoon on the Sabbath, and then you need first day of the week. And if you are teaching that first day, Miaton Sabbaton means first day of the week in Acts, then you kind of need it to mean first day of the week here too. So, okay, what I'm really trying to say is where I have labeled the videos, and I might change the labeling of this one to be Miaton Sabbaton used as the idiom for day one of the week. And they're saying it's according to Semitic idiom. So they're pushing us back to Jewish or, the Semitic communities of the day that would have been using this. So I set about to, as I was thinking about this, I set about to see if I could find other Semitic uses of the idiom. Well, let me show you a couple things that I looked up and found today. First of all, there is, as I went looking, somebody, when I Googled, what I Googled was, let me see if I can find exactly what I Googled here. Yeah, is Miaton Sabbaton a Hebrew idiom? And I might have, for this search done, is first day of the week a Hebrew idiom. But this is one of the websites that it pulled and one of the explanations that it pulled. And there's just some interesting information here that I want to share. First of all, and because I could look it up, but they already have, the word Sabbath is in the Greek transliteration of the Hebrew Shabbat, appears 68 times in the Greek New Testament. 60 of those times it's translated Sabbath or Sabbath day, exactly as I have said in my videos in the past. Almost every time we see this word back here, this word, here I'll show it here. This word here, Sabbaton, every time we see it, almost always it's translated as Sabbath, just as it should be, because that's what it means. But there are 8 occurrences where it's not. And all of them tend to be around the same gospel accounts I was talking about. Here's Matthew 28. Oops, I didn't mean to do that. Let me go back. Matthew 28. Here is Mark 16:2. Here's Luke 18:12. Luke 24:1. Oh, okay. Actually, Luke 18:12 is not the same. This is one of the different things where Sabbato is translated as a week because of the term D-tau, which is twice a week. So this is really a different topic, twice a week, which gives rise to a whole nother set of discussions, and which I would say this could be twice as Sabbath. It's possible it could be twice as Sabbath. To say that it must be twice a week because that's the only acceptable explanation for this Greek word, I just don't agree with that, because there are other potential explanations for it. So translating it as twice a week from this, because it's the only explanation, would not work for me. But they keep on going here. Here is the first day of the week. Here's Luke 24:1. Here is John 21, chapter 20, verse 1. And then here is John 20:19, which is related to a little later in that day when they were still shut up in the room. And then here is the use of it in Acts. Okay. And then I guess there's another use of Mian. It's a little different. Mian Sabbaton, where it's translated as first day of the week. You lay something aside, but it was really Mian Sabbaton, which also could have been translated as on one of the Sabbaths. So basically, in these 8 occurrences, I said 7 of them, but let's just say, just to quickly say, there are 6 of them referencing in the various gospel accounts the event, that resurrection day. A few of them, 5, let's say 5 of them referencing Mary and the women coming to the tomb. One of them referencing later in the day on the Sabbath, I believe. But I'm not trying to be exact on here. I'm just really trying to say that, that the use of Sabbath is appropriate throughout all of the throughout the new writing. It's appropriately translated as the Sabbath, except for this gathering of 8 occurrences, most of them related to the resurrection. Okay, they go on. She goes on to make another explanation, but I'm not going to go there. Let me go to, I want to show something else here before I move off to, let me just show you something else. So there was a woman who's asking, and I got this from the same search, a woman asking, why is in Acts chapter 20, verse 7, why is the phrase Miaton Sabbaton translated the first day of the week when it could mean first Sabbath? Well, I would say, I think they're making a fundamental mistake when they're still assuming that Mia is first, because it's not. It's rarely, only in those the context that we just discussed is it being translated as first. It's one. I've done so many. I have visited that, and Doesn't make me right. I'm a fairly simple guy who has taken it serious and am trying to do critical work on it. And there will be people who are Greek, people proficient in Greek who study Greek who will come back and say, well, here, dummy, here's why. I guess, but then they're the ones that are giving me so many explanations, explaining away what seems to be obvious. And they don't all agree, and they're explaining away. When in truth, if I just apply what seems literal and obvious, everything takes its place. It seems to be the correct rendering because everything begins to fall in place so much when I start counting the days of the week and what must have happened that resurrection week, the Passover week. It all starts making sense when I start applying the literal translation, one of the Sabbaths. But what I'm visiting here for is because I was looking for the Semitic idiom of miaton Sabbaton being used as, or even the use of Sabbaton in use as week. Well, I'm not really finding, I guess so. Here's where I am finding it is in this guy's write-up. He's referring back to the Septuagint, which has some credibility because what is the Septuagint? The Septuagint was the Greek translation from Hebrew done in the days of Greece prior to Messiah's coming. And it was a very popular, translation for them around that time, by all appearances and by evidences. Well, we're seeing, if this is the word mian here, that we're taking this here. Here's what his argument is. This is impartial evidence. This is a write-up, but he's talking about it being impartial evidence that this would mean it's a literal idiom for the first day of the week. And what would that mean? That would be first of the Sabbaths again. First Sabbaton being an idiom for the first day of the week. And this is the explanation he's giving because we have good evidence that Jewish Greek used the word mia for the first day of the week in the expression mia ton Sabbaton, the first day of the week. For example, the Septuagint inscription to Psalm 24, we find this appears to be mian or miaton and Sabbaton, and in the Psalm which is a Psalm for David, and they translated it as first day of the week in the Greek Septuagint, I suppose. And then here's a write-up about Luke 18:12, but I'm not going to spend any real time on that either. It is argued, I guess I am going to spend time on it. It is argued by some that Sabbaton should never be translated as week, for the author would have used this word instead, both in the Old and New Testament. There are instances where the author is clearly referring to a week rather than Sabbath, using or Sabbaton or a declension, if that's the right pronunciation of that word, thereof. And then he uses Luke 18:12, and he's one of those guys, I think, that is saying that because, I didn't mean to do that, because it reads, you can't fast twice a day, that it must mean that I fast twice a week. So he's basically saying the only explanation is that. And he's got a write-up, and if you really want to go look at this, it's by biblical hermeneutics. You could do a search and find this. Do the search for it's if you do the search is miaton Sabbaton. Well, here, let me just show you my search. Here's the search. If you do a search for is miaton Sabbaton, a Hebrew idiom, the first thing you'll find is this right up here, biblical hermeneutics. And that's where I'm at, and this is the first of the responses to that. And if you were interested, rather than me reading this, you could go visit this yourself and see what his argument is for this. But what I'm really trying to, and taking a long time to get there, I'm sorry, is that there were some additional uses of this word, which appears to be, mia, being rendered, and then this is being Sabbaton, rendered first day of the week in Psalm 24:1. I think he referenced this up here, and in Psalm 94:1, I suppose. So is there some slight evidence of miaton Sabbaton being used as an idiom for first day of the week? Maybe these would be a couple of things related to it But outside of that, I'm not finding anything really good or obvious that anywhere else do we have the Jewish communities, the Hebrew communities who are Greek speaking using Miaton Sabbaton as an idiom for first day of the week. Let me visit one last thing here. This is the video. This is my second video that I did. First day of the week is an idiom part 2. And in response to that, I have someone who made a comment to that and said, basically, I had a long argument with Grok AI the other day, laugh out loud, and I'm totally convinced that the accepted translation is erroneous. So I wasn't 100% sure while he was saying it was interesting to me, but I just wanted clarification. So, were you saying that you think that the first day of the week is wrong or right? That it should be, Miaton Sabbaton should be translated as first day of the week. And he went on to clarify, he says, I think that the first day of the week. So basically, I'm taking that to mean that I think that translating Miaton Sabbaton as the idiom for first day of the week is wrong. And there are no outside examples of that phrase being used as an idiom besides the gospel accounts. And so he also went looking for the use of Miaton Sabbaton as an idiom for first day of the week outside of the gospel accounts. And he's saying I didn't find it. However, Grok was trying to convince him otherwise. And this is how it ended, laugh out loud. Me, still not convincing to me. Grok in response, this is their conversation. Grok in responding to him. That's fine. I wouldn't expect it to be. If one of the Sabbaths, which is Miaton Sabbaton, doesn't feel like a natural way to say Sunday, because clearly Grok is trying to also convince this person that that it must be referencing the first day of the week because it was an idiom, Miaton Sabbaton. One of the Sabbaths is an idiom for Sunday, so that makes Miaton Sabbaton, or the English rendition of it, one of the Sabbaths, an idiom to say Sunday. That's what Grok is basically telling him, which is also Sunday is the first day of the week. So he's arguing for its use as an idiom, but just like I'm finding, there's really no obvious use of it as an idiom outside of the gospel accounts. Let me just finish what Grok said, because honestly, without the tradition, it's not natural. It just isn't. But the fact that no Greek writer ever says Miaton Sabbaton anywhere else, that actually helps you. It means that this is insider talk, Jewish shorthand, maybe even code. The text expects you to know what it means. If you don't, you're approaching it raw. If you're approaching it raw, then yeah, it's not Sunday. So what are we saying here? Grok is saying that Miaton Sabbaton is not used anywhere else. It's not used in that outside of, it's just not used outside of the gospel accounts as he's talking about. But he's saying that that actually helps you because it seems to be evidence that it must be insider talk for, or even Jewish shorthand or code, insider talk, that, and they expect you to know that Miaton Sabbaton would have meant first day of the week. And if you don't, you would have to render it for exactly what it is, which is one of the Sabbaths. So what he's basically saying is that as the ISR did in the scriptures, they're basically saying that because it must mean first day of the week, then it must mean that when they said Miaton Sabbaton, they must have meant first day of the week, because there's no other explanation in church teaching, in the teaching that we've been given, or in the positions that Messiah must have raised up on, in the afternoon on the Sabbath. So all of these things cause you to reason out that it had to be the first day of the week, and those occurrences had to be on the first day of the week. And if those occurrences had to be on the first day of the week, then Miaton Sabbaton must have been an idiom for first day of the week. But what if there is an explanation for those events, which I've built? I mean, I think Yahushua, I think the Messiah was raised first, prote, that's not the correct word. There's a word for first, chief, foremost. Can't remember what the word was. But the very first thing that happened on the Sabbath was he arose. And then very early on the Sabbath, they came and found the tomb empty. So the very the very first thing that occurs on the Sabbath is he rises. And then shortly after that, they would have come to find the tomb empty. And that is an explanation. Now, you would have to give up the idea that Messiah had to be in the grave a full 3 days, meaning a full 24-hour periods, because you will not get to a full 24-hour period that way. But then, as I have explained in other videos, you just don't have to. You don't have to have full days to complete the meaning of, just like Jonah was in the belly of the whale for 3 days. Well, it doesn't say 3 full days. It doesn't say 3 full 24-hour days. It literally could be he was in the belly for 3 days. It doesn't mean exactly 3 days. On the third day, he rose. We would have been in the midst, or on the third day, Jonah may have come out of the belly of the whale. Well, it doesn't mean that you had to wait until right at the end of that third day and then Jonah comes out of the whale, or right at the end of the third day and then Messiah is raised up. No, it could be on the third day, which we find precedence for in the scriptures. On the third day, he is raised. On the third day, Jonah leaves the belly of the whale. So if you embrace, if that is certainly at least an explanation. And if it's a correct explanation, then Miaton Sabbaton can go right back to doing what it, meaning it literally what it meant when they wrote it on one of the Sabbaths. It all makes sense. Only if you have to take a certain position, and it must be that Mary shows up on the first day of the week, must you then assume Miaton Sabbaton is an idiom for first day of the week. All right, well, this was supposed to be a short video, and I guess for me it is a relatively short video. I'm sorry, I just don't seem to be able to make short videos. But before I close here, and as I close, I'm going to be taking this video and putting it into a playlist on my channel. And the reason that I'm explaining this now is that I have made, I made a couple things. This goes back. One of my early iterations was, a video I did called Acts chapter 20, verse 7, where I did the first day of the week, or one of the Sabbaths, which was shortly after I discovered what was going on and pursued it at that point in time. And I made a part 1 and a part 2 of that. Related to that is the discussion, towards the end of this video you just watched, was a discussion of, when did the Sabbath or the resurrection occur? Was it first thing on a Sabbath or later in the day around 3 p.m. in the Sabbath? And inside of this playlist is that video where I do discuss why, if you literally take the Miaton Sabbaton for what it means, then, and the prote, what's the word I'm trying to think of? I should look it up, but I haven't. I'm sorry, I had to interject. I had to go look it up because I didn't like that I wasn't, I was kind of drawing a blank on it here. But here we are in Mark 16:9, the word that it talks about, where this word prote, we have proi, which is early, then you have proti. I guess I should be saying proti, not prote. Proti Sabbato. So they've rendered it first of the week. So having now risen early the first of the week, but if we go to 44:13, it's first, foremost, chief, principal. So it's basically the foremost in time, place, order, or importance. So the very first thing that happened, according to this, is the very first thing, the chief thing that happened is that he rose. Having risen, first thing, that's to go backwards. Having risen, first thing, chief, first thing, which then precedes them coming to the tomb, which would be, back here, let's see, is it Mark 2? I'm sorry. Very early, proite, miaton, sabbaton. So very early on the day, first day of the week. So this would be very early on that first day, but it's not the chief thing. The chief thing that happened was that Yahushua would have arisen. And if Yahushua was already risen, then miaton sabbaton can take its literal meaning, which means on one of the Sabbaths, very early on one of the Sabbaths, if he had already risen, then all the rest of it makes sense. But if he hasn't risen, and if it takes, he doesn't rise till 3 p.m. later in the afternoon, then miaton Sabbaton would make no sense for the rest of it, because having come to the tomb, they found him already gone. So if he doesn't rise till late in the afternoon on the Sabbath, then this must be, miaton Sabbaton must be an idiom for first day of the week. So let me go back to the channel here. So I do have this video where I laid that out for you. I didn't date it. I need to date it. I'll probably go back in and date it just so you can keep order, because as I go, I am, things are shaping. Maybe maturing is the wrong word. What I mean by that is, by maturing in this sense, is that I'm just gathering more data, and so it's just filling in holes and changing perspectives as I go. So dates are probably important on my videos, because the newer they are, the more they will reflect what I currently understand. And in some of my older videos, there might be some understandings that I had that I have since departed with, but don't want to take the videos down from, because they have other value there. So I also then created, and this would be, I created a couple of videos that I labeled the first day of the week as an idiom part 1. And then I made a part 2 where there was a reason why I did that. But probably it should have been, I should have labeled this, because the first day of the week is not the idiom. Miaton Sabbaton would be the idiom for first day of the week. Probably would have been the more correct way to say this. So first day of the week is not an idiom. Miaton Sabbaton, everybody's telling us that miaton Sabbaton is an idiom, and then excusing it away because they need it to mean first day of the week. Okay, and so then I will be placing, as soon as I get this video finished and prepared, I'll be placing it in the same playlist, and it'll be titled, I believe it's going to be entitled, Is Miaton Sabbaton an Idiom for First Day of the Week? Because that's really what I think we're dealing with now. Okay, well, thank you, and may you be Baruch.